Commander Ixel of the Galactic Defense Academy stood motionless, all four of her sensory stalks rigid with disbelief as she reviewed the latest performance metrics. The data couldn't be correct. She blinked her compound eyes, causing a ripple of iridescent colors to wash across her crystalline exoskeleton, but the numbers remained unchanged. "They're improving at an impossible rate," she murmured to her assistant, a towering Vanguardian named Kelrix. 3 months of training, and they've already mastered techniques that take other species years to grasp. The they in question were the first group of human cadets ever admitted to the Academy. 20 of them, to be precise, chosen from Earth's various military organizations to represent their species in the galaxy's most prestigious military institution. "Perhaps we should reconsider their participation in the Strategic Response Assessment," Kelrix suggested, his gravitational field fluctuating with concern. "The other species are uncomfortable with their methods." Commander Ixel chittered in amusement, uncomfortable because they're effective, or uncomfortable because they're unpredictable. "Both," Kelrix admitted. "Yesterday, during the orbital defense simulation, Cadet Sarah Chen deployed mining drones as impromptu kinetic weapons. It wasn't explicitly against the rules, but it wasn't how things are traditionally done," Ixel finished. "And that's precisely why they're here." Through the observation window, they watched as the human cadets participated in their daily training exercises. Unlike the other species who moved with practiced precision through standardized drills, the humans seemed to be playing. There was no other word for it. They had turned the anti-gravity chamber into something they called a paintball arena, claiming it improved their spatial awareness and tactical thinking. Cadet Chen, a compact woman with sharp features and quick movements, was currently leading her team in what appeared to be a chaotic free-for-all. But Ixel's trained eye could see the patterns emerging from the chaos: complex flanking maneuvers, psychological warfare, and resource management, all happening simultaneously. "Their neural architecture is fascinating," Ixel commented, pulling up a holographic display of human brain scans. "Most species develop either strong analytical capabilities or quick adaptive responses. Humans somehow maintain both simultaneously. They can create detailed long-term strategies while making split-second tactical adjustments. A product of their Deathworld evolution, no doubt," Kelrix responded. "But it's their psychological profile that truly concerns the board. They appear to actually enjoy combat situations. They seek out challenges, deliberately create problems to solve, and seem to thrive under pressure." The chamber's observation panel suddenly lit up with activity. Cadet Chen's team had developed a new tactic, using their magnetic boots to run along the walls while another team provided covering fire. It was completely unorthodox, tactically risky, and surprisingly effective. "The Strategic Response Assessment is in 2 days," Kelrix noted. "The board expects them to fail. They believe humans lack the discipline and patience for proper military strategy." Commander Ixel's sensory stalks quivered with what might have been amusement. The board still thinks in terms of proper and improper. They haven't realized that humanity's greatest weapon isn't their technology or their physical capabilities. It's their ability to redefine what's possible. A loud cheer erupted from the chamber as Cadet Chen's team claimed victory, their training suits covered in multiple colors of specialized paint. The humans were laughing, already discussing improvements and variations to their tactics. "You know what truly terrifies the board?" Ixel asked, turning to face her assistant. "It's not that humans might fail. It's that they might succeed, and in doing so, prove that everything we think we know about military doctrine is wrong." The Academy's central AI announced the end of the training session, and the human cadets began filing out of the chamber. They moved with an ease that belied their species' reputation as awkward newcomers to galactic society. Each of them had that distinctive human expression, what they called a smile, that still unsettled many of the Academy's instructors. "The assessment will test more than just their tactical abilities," Kelrix warned. "It's a comprehensive evaluation of strategic thinking, resource management, and long-term planning. No species has ever completed it in less than the allocated time. It's designed to be impossible to rush. Commander Ixal's exoskeleton shifted to a deep blue, indicating deep thought. Perhaps that's exactly why humans might excel at it. They have a peculiar habit of achieving the impossible simply because no one told them it couldn't be done. As if to emphasize her point, Cadet Chen approached the observation window and snapped a crisp salute. "Commander, permission to access the historical combat archives. We have some theories we'd like to test before the assessment." "Granted," Ixal responded, noting how the cadet's eyes lit up with enthusiasm. "But remember, Cadet, the assessment is designed to evaluate orthodox military strategy." Chen's smile widened just slightly. "With respect, Commander, humanity's greatest military victories have rarely come from orthodox strategies." As the cadet departed, Kelrix's gravitational field fluctuated with concern. "They're planning something." "Of course they are," Ixal replied, her sensory stalks dancing with anticipation. "The question is whether the galaxy is ready for it." The next 2 days would prove to be more revolutionary than anyone, except perhaps the humans themselves, could have anticipated. The Strategic Response Assessment was about to encounter something it had never faced before: human ingenuity unleashed. The Academy's grand amphitheater hummed with a peculiar energy on the morning of the assessment. Thousands of beings from across the galaxy filled the crystalline chamber, their varied forms creating a living tapestry of evolutionary diversity. At the center of it all, the human cadets sat together, conspicuously casual among the rigid formality of their alien peers. High Admiral Vex Thor, a massive Centaurian whose cybernetic enhancements gleamed under the ambient light, took the central platform. His voice, amplified by the chamber's acoustics, filled the space. "This year's Strategic Response Assessment will be different," he announced, his secondary arms gesturing at the holographic display behind him. "We face an unprecedented era of change in our galaxy. Therefore, the Council has authorized a new simulation protocol." Sarah Chen glanced at her fellow cadets, noting their subtle shifts in posture. After countless hours studying historical battle records, they'd developed an almost supernatural ability to sense when the rules were about to change. Instead of individual evaluations, Vex Thor continued, "Teams will compete simultaneously in an interconnected scenario. Your actions will directly affect other participants in real time." A murmur of surprise rippled through the audience. This was a radical departure from tradition, where candidates faced standardized challenges in isolation. The alien cadets looked uncertain, their various appendages twitching with nervous energy. Additionally, the Admiral added, "We've removed all artificial time constraints. The simulation will continue until either a decisive victory is achieved or all teams are eliminated." In the observation booth, Commander Ixal noticed the humans' reactions. While other species showed signs of stress at this unprecedented change, the human cadets appeared energized. Cadet Chen was already whispering to her teammates, their faces animated with what Ixal had learned to recognize as excitement. "The simulation begins in 1 standard hour," Vex Thor concluded. "Use this time to prepare your strategies." As the teams dispersed to their preparation rooms, Ixal followed the humans. She found them not hunched over tactical displays or reviewing standard protocols, but engaged in what appeared to be a game. "Cadets," she announced her presence, "this is hardly the time for recreation." Chen looked up from what appeared to be a crude physical model of the galaxy, made from various objects scrounged from around the room. "With respect, Commander, we're not playing. We're thinking in 3 dimensions. Another cadet, Marcus Wong, grinned as he moved what appeared to be a coffee cup across their makeshift galaxy. "Traditional strategic displays are too rigid, too predictable. We needed something more fluid." Ixal's sensory stalks twitched with curiosity. "Explain." "In standard galactic warfare," Chen said, rearranging their improvised model, "fleets move along established trade routes and gravitational corridors. Everyone expects this. But space is 3-dimensional, And human history is full of victories achieved by approaching from unexpected angles. Like Nelson at the Battle of the Nile, another cadet chimed in, or the Mongolian flanking maneuvers, or the island-hopping campaign in the Pacific. Ixel noticed they had somehow acquired the technical specifications for the simulation parameters. Those documents are restricted, she noted, trying to sound stern. Are they? Chen asked innocently. The regulations said we couldn't access the simulation controls. They never mentioned anything about studying the underlying framework. Besides, we only looked at the public documentation, which happened to be very informative, Wang added with a smirk, especially the error logs from previous assessments. Ixel's exoskeleton shifted through several colors as she processed this. The humans hadn't broken any rules. They'd simply found gaps in them that no one else had thought to exploit. It was simultaneously impressive and terrifying. You realize, she said carefully, that unorthodox tactics often fail spectacularly in these assessments. The simulation is designed to reward traditional strategic thinking. That's what makes it predictable, Chen replied, her eyes gleaming. Every eye, no matter how advanced, operates on patterns. And humans, we're very good at pattern recognition. More importantly, we're good at pattern disruption. The makeshift galaxy model on their table had evolved into something that looked less like a strategic display and more like a three-dimensional chess game designed by someone with a questionable grip on reality. Yet as Ixel watched, she began to see the logic in their madness. 10 minutes to simulation start, the Academy AI announced. The humans began packing away their improvised planning tools, but their expressions remained confident, almost eager. Chen turned to Ixel with that unsettling human smile. Commander, you might want to watch this one carefully, she said. We're about to demonstrate why humanity's greatest military advantage isn't our technology or our strength. Oh. Ixel's sensory stalks quivered with curiosity. And what is it? Our imagination, Chen replied, and our absolute refusal to accept arbitrary limitations. As the cadets filed out toward the simulation chambers, Ixel couldn't shake the feeling that she was about to witness either a spectacular failure or something that would change galactic military doctrine forever. With humans, she was learning there was rarely any middle ground. The simulation pods powered up, their crystalline surfaces humming with energy. Across the chamber, teams of various species settled into their designated stations, each following procedures refined over centuries of military tradition. Only the humans seemed to be improvising, rearranging their pod configuration in ways that made the technical supervisors nervous. In the control room, Admiral Vexthor watched with growing unease as the humans completed their preparations. They can't possibly think they can beat centuries of established doctrine with improvisation, he muttered. Commander Ixel, standing beside him, felt her exoskeleton shift to the deep blue of anticipation. Sir, she replied, I believe that's exactly what they're planning to do. The countdown began, and with it, the galaxy was about to learn an important lesson about the danger of underestimating human creativity. The simulation began with the traditional ceremony of fleet deployment. Across the holographic battlefield, 20 different species positioned their forces according to time-honored military doctrine. Dreadnoughts formed perfect defensive lines, patrol squadrons established standard search patterns, and resource ships began their carefully plotted supply routes. All except for the humans. What are they doing? Admiral Vexthor demanded, his cybernetic eye whirring as it tried to track the erratic movement of the human fleet. Instead of deploying in formation, their ships were scattering in all directions, seemingly at random. In the control room, tactical officers of various species scrambled to make sense of the human strategy. Their movements defied every known principle of fleet organization. Ships moved in spiral patterns, divided into impossibly small groups, and performed maneuvers that seemed to serve no practical purpose. Sir, a Proximan analyst reported, their crystalline form pulsing with confusion, we're detecting unusual energy signatures from the human ships. They appear to be powering down their primary systems. Commander Ixel watched as Cadet Chen's tactical display filled with status updates. The humans had indeed shut down main power on multiple vessels, leaving them drifting in apparently random trajectories. "They're dead in space," someone muttered. "They've lost before they've begun." But Ixel noticed something else. The humans were smiling. The first hour of the simulation passed without major engagement. The traditional forces established their territories, fortified key positions, and began the careful dance of strategic positioning that typically characterized these exercises. The human ships continued their bizarre movements, or lack thereof, scattered across seemingly meaningless coordinates. Then everything changed. It started with a supply convoy from the Arcturian fleet. They detected an anomaly, a powered-down human vessel directly in their path. Following standard protocol, they moved to investigate the potential distress situation. That's when Sarah Chen's voice came over the command channel, clear and almost cheerful. "Operation Thunderbolt. Execute." Suddenly, the dormant human ships blazed to life. But they weren't where they had appeared to be. The powered-down signatures had been decoys, sophisticated holographic projections hiding the real vessels in their sensor shadows. The actual human fleet had been moving under minimal power, masked by their own decoys, positioning themselves over the past hour. "Impossible," Vexthor exclaimed. "The simulation parameters don't allow for." "Sir," a tactical officer interrupted, "they didn't modify the simulation. They're using the standard sensor protocols against themselves. Each decoy creates a small blind spot in our detection grid. They'd been hiding their real ships in those blind spots. The result was chaos. Human vessels appeared seemingly out of nowhere, striking at critical supply lines and communication nodes. Their attack patterns made no sense until viewed as a whole. They weren't trying to capture territory or engage in direct combat. They were creating confusion." "Look at their target selection," Ixel observed, her sensory stalks quivering with revelation. "They're not attacking military targets. They're disrupting command and control structures." Indeed, the human strategy became clear. While other species focused on controlling space and engaging enemy fleets, the humans were systematically destroying the ability of their opponents to coordinate their forces. Communication relays, supply lines, sensor networks, anything that allowed the traditional fleets to maintain their rigid organizational structure was being eliminated. In the simulation pod, Sarah Chen orchestrated the chaos with precise control. "Phase 2, she commanded. "Implement the Hydra protocol." The scattered human forces suddenly began operating with completely different tactical patterns. Ships that had been acting independently formed impromptu wolf packs. Units that had been attacking would suddenly turn to defense. There was no discernible pattern to predict. "They're using synchronized randomness," a tactical analyst realized. "Each unit has multiple pre-planned protocols, but they switch between them unpredictably. The overall strategy appears chaotic, but each individual action is precisely calculated. The traditional fleets try to adapt, but their responses were too slow, too predictable. Centuries of military doctrine had prepared them for conventional warfare, not this constantly shifting battlefield where the enemy seemed to be everywhere and nowhere at once." "Sir," the Proximan analyst reported, their crystalline form now pulsing with alarm, "we're detecting a cascade effect. The disruption of command and control systems is causing fleet coordination to break down across multiple species. They're starting to fire on each other in the confusion." Vexthor watched in stunned silence as the carefully organized battle lines dissolved into disorder. The humans hadn't needed to destroy their opponents' fleets. They had simply created conditions where the rigid traditional tactics became a liability rather than an advantage. "It's beautiful," Ixel whispered, her exoskeleton shifting through patterns of amazement. They turned the entire simulation into a demonstration of chaos theory. Small, precise actions creating massive, unpredictable results. In the simulation pod, Sarah Chen allowed herself a small smile as she watched the tactical display. The humans hadn't just violated the conventional wisdom of galactic warfare. They had proven it fundamentally flawed. Victory wasn't about controlling the battlefield. It was about controlling the flow of information and the ability to adapt. Final phase, she announced to her team. Let's show them why humans don't just embrace chaos. We weaponize it. As the third hour of the simulation began, it was becoming clear that the galaxy's understanding of warfare was about to undergo a radical transformation. The question was no longer whether the humans would win, but how much of the established military doctrine would survive their victory. The fourth hour of the simulation marked the beginning of what would later be termed the Great Unraveling in Academy records. The chaos induced by the human strategy had reached critical mass, but as the control room would soon discover, this had been merely the prelude. Multiple fleet signatures detected. The sensor officer's voice cracked with disbelief. They're coming from inside the designated neutral zones. Admiral Vexthor lurched forward, his cybernetic enhancements whirring in agitation. Impossible. The neutral zones are hard-coded into the simulation. No military vessels can operate there. Correction, sir. Cadet Chen's voice came through clear and precise. No military vessels can enter the neutral zones. But we never did. The tactical display told the story. During the initial chaos, the humans had been systematically positioning civilian ships, cargo vessels, mining platforms, and passenger liners throughout the neutral zones. None of these movements had triggered military alerts because they weren't classified as combat vessels. Now, Chen announced, observe what happens when you repurpose civilian infrastructure. The civilian vessels suddenly began transforming. Cargo holds opened to reveal missile batteries. Mining lasers reoriented toward military targets. Passenger liners ejected swarms of combat drones disguised as escape pods. This is outrageous, Vexthor thundered. These tactics violate every convention of civilized warfare. Commander Ixel's sensory stalks swayed in fascination. Do they? The humans haven't broken a single rule. They've simply demonstrated that our very concept of military assets is dangerously narrow. The converted civilian fleet struck from positions that, according to all standard military doctrine, should have been completely safe. The remaining organized battle groups found themselves caught between the chaos of the compromised command structures and precise strikes from supposedly secure zones. In the simulation pod, Sarah Chen and her team worked with practiced precision. Execute Protocol Lazarus, she commanded. Across the battlefield, human ships that had been reported as destroyed suddenly powered back up. They had never been eliminated, merely powered down to such low levels that the simulation registered them as debris. Now they reactivated, emerging from debris fields and asteroid clusters like ghosts returning to haunt the battlefield. Phase 3 completion confirmed, Marcus Wong reported. Beginning final convergence. The scattered human forces began moving with new purpose, but not toward enemy fleets or strategic positions. Instead, they were targeting something far more fundamental, the very infrastructure of galactic civilization. They're attacking the trade routes, a tactical officer realized. Not the ships, the automated navigation beacons, the hyperspace markers, the standardized course plotting systems. Ixel watched in growing understanding. They're not trying to win a war, she said softly. They're demonstrating how to collapse an entire civilization's infrastructure. The simulation's artificial intelligence struggled to process the cascading effects. With trade routes compromised, supply lines severed, and communication networks in chaos, the carefully maintained balance of galactic society began to crumble. Economic systems failed, diplomatic channels collapsed, and the very foundations of interstellar cooperation shattered. Stop the simulation, Vexthor commanded. This has gone far enough. Unable to comply, the AI responded. Simulation parameters require either total victory or complete system failure. Chen's voice came through again, calm and almost professorial. You're witnessing what humans call a systemic shock. In our history, we've learned that societies don't just fall to military might. They collapse when their fundamental systems fail. The tactical display showed the final phase of the human strategy. Their forces weren't attacking military targets anymore. They were systematically dismantling the very systems that made galactic civilization possible. Navigation became unreliable, communication broke down, and the carefully maintained order of space dissolved into chaos. The simulation will end in approximately 3 minutes, Chen announced. Not because we've destroyed our opponents, but because we've demonstrated something far more important: the fundamental vulnerability of any system that relies too heavily on order and predictability. In the control room, a profound silence fell as the implications became clear. The humans hadn't just beaten the simulation. They had revealed dangerous assumptions built into the very foundation of galactic military doctrine. 7 minutes and 13 seconds, Ixel noted quietly. They've accomplished in 7 minutes what the simulation was designed to teach in 10 years. The final moments of the simulation played out like a carefully orchestrated symphony of destruction. Not through overwhelming force or superior technology, but through the simple application of human ingenuity to expose and exploit the weaknesses inherent in rigid systems. As the simulation ended, Sarah Chen's voice carried a note of both triumph and warning. This wasn't just a demonstration of tactical superiority. It was a lesson about the danger of assuming that order and chaos are opposites. Sometimes, the most ordered systems are the most vulnerable to collapse. Admiral Vexthor stood rigid, his cybernetic systems processing the implications. The Council will never accept these results, he stated flatly. With respect, Admiral, Chen replied. They don't have to accept them. The point wasn't to win your approval. It was to show you what happens when you underestimate humanity's capacity for innovative thinking. As the simulation pods powered down and the cadets emerged, the control room erupted into furious debate. But Commander Ixel noticed something interesting. The humans weren't celebrating their victory. Instead, they were already huddled together, discussing improvements and refinements to their strategy. The message was clear. This wasn't just a victory in a simulation. It was a declaration that humanity had arrived on the galactic stage, bringing with them a perspective that would forever change the nature of strategic thinking. The emergency session of the Galactic Defense Council was called within hours of the simulation's conclusion. The vast chamber, normally a model of ceremonial order, buzzed with agitated energy as representatives from dozens of species argued over the implications of what they had witnessed. Commander Ixel stood before the assembly, her exoskeleton cycling through calm, professional colors despite the chaos around her. Distinguished members of the council, she began, we are here to discuss not just the results of a simulation, but a fundamental challenge to our understanding of warfare. The human cadets sat quietly in a designated observation area, their presence both a subject of controversy and a source of nervous glances from the assembled dignitaries. Sarah Chen maintained a carefully neutral expression, though her eyes missed nothing. This is absurd, thundered Councillor Zextal, his crystalline form vibrating with indignation. They turned a serious military exercise into a mockery. Their tactics violated every principle of civilized combat. Did they? Ixel's sensory stalks moved with deliberate precision, or did they simply demonstrate that our principles are based on dangerous assumptions? The holographic display activated, showing key moments from the simulation. The Council watched again as the human strategy unfolded, not through overwhelming force, but through the systematic exploitation of blind spots in galactic military doctrine. Consider, Ixel continued, that in 7 minutes and 13 seconds, 20 human cadets demonstrated how to collapse not just a military force, but an entire civilization's infrastructure. They did this without breaking the single rule of engagement, using only the tools and capabilities we ourselves provided. Admiral Vexthor stepped forward, his cybernetic enhancements gleaming. The implications are disturbing. Our entire defensive doctrine is based on the assumption that warfare follows predictable patterns. The humans have proven this assumption not just wrong, but dangerously naive. A murmur rippled through the assembly. Ixal noticed several representatives engaging their species' equivalent of nervous fidgeting. The implications were indeed disturbing. If cadets could devise such a strategy in a controlled simulation, what could a real human military accomplish? Perhaps, offered a Meridian representative, their quantum field fluctuating thoughtfully, we should consider restricting human participation in future military programs. For the stability of the galaxy. That, Chen's voice cut through the chamber with unexpected authority, would be your second mistake. All eyes, sensory organs, and various perception apparatuses turned to the human cadet. She had stood, her posture relaxed but confident. Permission to address the council, she requested formally. After a moment of tense silence, the High Counselor nodded. Distinguished representatives, Chen began, you're asking the wrong questions. You're focused on how to defend against our tactics, when you should be asking why they worked in the first place. She gestured to the holographic display. We didn't win because we're stronger or more technologically advanced. We won because we understand something fundamental about the nature of conflict. The most dangerous weakness isn't in your weapons or your shields. It's in your assumptions. The display shifted, showing the cascade of system failures their strategy had triggered. Every species here has evolved magnificent capabilities. You've developed technologies we can barely comprehend, but you've also developed blind spots, patterns of thinking so deeply ingrained that you can't see them anymore. And you humans can, challenged a council member. We have to, Chen replied simply. Humanity's history is a constant reminder that survival doesn't favor the strongest or the most advanced. It favors the most adaptable. We look for blind spots because we've learned the hard way what happens when we miss them. Commander Ixal moved to stand beside Chen, her exoskeleton shifting to a color pattern that indicated deep conviction. The cadets have given us an invaluable gift, she declared. They've shown us not just the flaws in our military doctrine, but in our entire approach to strategic thinking. The chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. The humans hadn't just won a simulation. They had demonstrated that the very foundations of galactic military theory needed to be reconsidered. We propose, Ixal continued, the establishment of a new division within the Academy. One focused not on teaching established doctrine, but on challenging it, on finding and addressing the blind spots in our thinking before our enemies do. And who would lead this division? Someone asked. We would work together, Chen answered. All species, all perspectives, combining the wisdom of galactic civilization with humanity's talent for unconventional thinking. Admiral Vexthor's cybernetic eye wavered as he processed the proposal. The old guard will resist, he noted. Of course they will, Chen smiled. Change is uncomfortable. But comfort is a luxury we can't afford when the stakes are this high. Over the next several hours, the council debated, argued, and finally reached a consensus. The galaxy's military establishment would never be the same, and perhaps that was exactly what it needed. As the session concluded, Commander Ixal found Chen staring out of the stars through the chamber's vast observation window. Was this your plan all along? Ixal asked. To force us to confront our own limitations. Chen's reflection smiled in the crystalline window. The best victories, she said, aren't the ones that destroy your opponents. They're the ones that make them stronger. The stars twinkled silently, bearing witness to a moment that would be remembered as the beginning of a new era in galactic military thought. Humanity had arrived not as conquerors or subordinates, but as catalysts for evolution. And in the vast darkness of space, new possibilities awakened.